Now, I'd like to bring up Dr. Jacqueline Hudson, the Filson's African American History Programs Manager. Launched publicly in 2023, the African American History Initiative, or AAHI, allows the Filson Historical Society to work alongside institutional and community partners to more fully collect, preserve, and share the significant stories of Black history and culture in Louisville, Kentucky, and Southern Indiana, and across the Ohio Valley region. Please welcome the brilliant curator of AHI, Dr. Jacqueline Hudson.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening and welcome. It is an honor to introduce tonight's panel of experts and storytellers, but I would like to share a bit more about the African American History Initiative. The AAHI is a permanent component of the Filson's Department of Collections and Research. This long-term effort expands Filson's collections, educational programs, and relationships, building upon existing foundations and filling in identified gaps. Unlike the entire Filson, the AAHI both convenes and drives public and academic conversations about the past, but with significant contemporary impact. Black history matters. The Filson already has a proud and extensive record of collecting, preserving, and sharing important work on Black history in Kentucky. Our collections contain materials and perspectives on Black businesses, artists, entertainers, architects, educators, churches, families, and more. Our African American History Initiative helped publicize the rich and meaningful stories entrusted to the Filson in the past and works to collect, preserve, and share new ones for the future. Now, let's talk about our incredible panel. Mariel Gardner, West End Collective. Mariel Gardner was born in the mouth of Susquehanna River in Havre de Grace, Maryland, and hails from another French river city on the banks of the Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky. Raised in the Algonquin neighborhood of Louisville, West End, Mariel is the graduate of the J. Graham Brown School in the University of Louisville. Welcome, Mariel. Our next panel is LaMont Collins from Roots 101 Museum. Today, telling Black stories is exactly what he continues to do as the founder and CEO of Roots 101 African American Museum in downtown Louisville. He named it Roots 101 because in higher education, the first class you take is 101. The museum serves as an educational journey from Africa to America. Mr. Collins is a font of knowledge, and his passion is to reach, teach, share, and inspire people of all ages, but particularly young people. There's an African proverb that says, "The greatest king plants shade trees, knowing he'll never sit up under them." I am planting trees, trees of knowledge, trees of unity, trees of love, trees of prosperity. I won't live to see the shadows, but I'll plant the trees big enough to cast the shadows. Welcome, Mr. LaMont Collins. Our next panelist is Hannah Drake from the Unknown Project. Hannah Drake is a blogger, podcast host, activist, public speaker, poet, and author of 11 books. I'm just trying to get right to one. She is the co-executive director of Ideas Lab and co-founder of the Unknown Project, which uncovers the hidden names and stories of enslaved Black people in Kentucky and beyond. Her writing on politics, feminism, and race has been featured in Cosmopolitan, the Washington Post, the Bitter Sudner, the Lily, and Harper's Bazaar. Recognized as the most admired woman in the arts by Today's Woman magazine, Hannah is also a daughter of greatness and a Kentucky Colonel. She is a Soros Fellow with the Open Society Foundation and was inducted into the Kentucky Women Remembered exhibit in 2023. In 2025, she received the Living the Vision Award honoring Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy. Hannah also holds an honorary doctorate in humanities from Simmons College in Kentucky. Her message challenges audiences, urging transformation through truth. She says, "My sole purpose is writing and speaking is not to entertain you. I'm trying to shake a nation." Now that's a word. Please welcome Hannah Drake. Our last panelist, Miguel Hampton, is a Jeffersonville, Indiana-based marketing professional, photographer, filmmaker, educator, and social entrepreneur whose works blend artistry with activism. Originally from Columbus, Ohio, Miguel has spent over 2 decades capturing powerful stories through photography and documentary film, focusing on culture, community, and social justice. As the founder of F5 Enterprises, he leads creative projects in branding, storytelling, and visual media while producing events as WEW Women's Power Breakfast, Black Votes Matter, the Move Forward live stream, Juneteenth Party, and conversations that spark meaningful dialogue. A seasoned speaker and business coach, Miguel is committed to empowering voices, building equity, and inspiring change through art and storytelling. Please welcome Miguel Hampton. And last but certainly not least, our moderator is Zakia Holland. Oh, sorry, let me start all over. Last but certainly not least is our moderator, Zakia Holland, who works with the organization called Play Cousin Collective in the Russell neighborhood. It is a family-centered network committed to building strong support systems around children and families. She is a Kentucky native and the director of youth enrichment at Play Cousin Collective, an Appalachian poet, event curator, creative director, and musician. She weaves artistry and community care into every facet of her work. Guided by a deep commitment to storytelling and youth empowerment, Zakia creates spaces where creativity, culture, and liberation can bloom. And lastly, if you could not view the Black Homecoming exhibit before tonight's program, we invite you to join us in the Nash Gallery at the conclusion of this discussion. The gallery will remain open until 7:45. The gallery and exhibit are also open weekdays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please join me in welcoming tonight's speakers.
Thank you. I'll get to be a little long-winded. Have a seat. Thank you all for being here tonight. We have some really powerful panelists today. And I'm just going to start off with a question, and whoever feels the most compelled to answer first. What does the phrase Black family bonds evoke for you personally or in your work? And how has that understanding evolved over time?
Is it me? Is this okay? First of all, thank you for having me here. I've worked with the Filson several times, particularly with the Unknown Project, and I've worked with Jenny a lot. And I'm a firm believer, so I printed this out so I could be ready, right? I'm ready, because Jenny would get me if I wasn't ready. In facts. What are the facts? What are the facts? The information. So you talked about family bonds, and the work, of course, that I do with the Unknown Project is finding the names of the enslaved. I don't think you can talk about the Black family in the United States and not mention enslavement. That's impossible. So we're just going to look at some numbers, and then so you have a reality of what happened to Black people when they were trafficked and brought here. So about 388,000 people, they estimate, enslaved Africans were brought to the United States. You could add 60,000 to 70,000, because it's all kind of just an estimate. So 1 million enslaved people were moved from the upper South to the lower South. Okay, so you've already separated a family. So there's a separation from Africa, then there's a separation once you get to North America. So when the transatlantic slave trade ended in 1808, there were about 1 million enslaved people in the United States. At the beginning of the Civil War, there were 4 million enslaved people in the United States. So if you can't bring in enslaved Africans, then somebody is producing more people. So that falls on the backs of Black men and women. And Kentucky enslaved almost 250,000 people. Kentucky sold about 80,000 of those people to the Deep South. So those were mothers and brothers and uncles and dads and sisters and brothers and children. That's what Kentucky did, okay? So Kentucky needs to face the reality when we talk about family. Kentucky was instrumental in breaking the bonds of the Black family and separating them with ease. And a lot of them that were separated, I think it was 1 in 4, were children. Okay, so right here at Farmington, there was an enslaved woman who had 11 children, and when she escaped for her freedom, she had 2 of the children with her. What are her 9 children? So we're going to talk about family. We need to talk about America, North America's role in the separation of family. So I don't even look at my own family, and I don't know, all of us are Black up here. Maybe you can trace and whatever. I would be willing to bet all of us up here have been impacted and cut off from our family. So we can only go back so far. So that's how I look at family bonds, is how far can I go back? How can I start looking for my family? What can I document for my daughter now so that she can look back? But that's how I will always look at the lens of the Black family, with how America really was a global thing, but cracked it first.
If I might, I think it's unique because so on my mother's side, we migrated to the U.S. in the early 50s. But when we talk about America, and I like that you said global, because we can go all the way back to Barbados, right? Most of the West Indies, which were all enslaved countries. And so we migrated from Jamaica and Barbados to Panama. Which again, all of these are enslaved communities, right, of Africans and Tainos and et cetera, et cetera. And then we ended up migrating to the U.S. But all across that line, our families are broken. Now, it's unique in some islands what the culture is. So like if you go to Barbados, there's a particular church where there's a book where everybody who has been in Edge Hill since the Edge Hills sailed from England to Barbados, has signed it. And so you have Black Edge Hills, right? And then you have White Edge Hills, because Martin Edgehill, who populated Barbados, basically married one of his slaves, had a lot of family, and then brought his white family to the island as well, and that split the island. And so that's just another dynamic of where that is. We think about bonds, and I think about, as a kid, I grew up wondering, why my mother named me Miguel. And I was really jealous because my brother's name is Jesus Bayano. And I got Miguel Sheldon, and I was like, why do we stop there? But, really trying to understand where we come from, why we look the way we look, what features we have, where certain skills come from and talents that are just innate. And it wasn't until we took that deep dive. Now, we were blessed. A lot of people don't have that privilege. We were blessed on my mother's side to be able to get there. Now, on my grandfather's side, we couldn't, but our grandfather brings us to Kentucky. And so, that begins to tell us a different story. On my father's side, he's half white and half Black, and on his biological father is African American, but he had no siblings, and there's no record of where he came from, right? How he got to the country, what slave master or plantation he came from. However, we can't track back the white side of the family, the German side of the family, to what country, when they came, and some different dynamics. The bond to the Black community or Black family is rich. It is extremely important that not only do we know our stories and where we connect internally, but many ways externally. And I'll wrap this up. And the reason why, I was sitting with a young man, probably 12 years old, couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how Black people are criminals, and how much he hated his skin color, and it was just a diatribe of negative of what Black is. Now, he's one of few Black people in his all-white school, and he's learning this through school system. He's learning this through the teachers. He's learning this through the other kids. And it took a while to finally to get him to break down. I was like, I hate being Black, right? And that hurts our heart, but that's because there's no history there. There's nothing for him to be proud of. He's in an environment that's consistently telling him, even in this day, that Black people have no value, and they're teaching this young man that. So I get back to that bond. It's important that we teach it. Both internally in our homes, externally in our systems, but we also know that we live in a system that is defined to do that very thing, and that is devalue and minimize people of color.
Did you all want to add?
I'll add this to it, I kind of simplify it. What I know as someone that owns a museum, somebody that has lived this life, is that one thing is where they identify Black families, period. My Jewish brothers and sisters tell their kids they're survivors from the time they're born. They have schools they go to tell them they're survivors and to tell them that they're greater than, right? And then in the Black community, we don't get our history. Our kids that never told they're survivor, and we're the greatest survivors to ever come to this country. And we're still surviving in a country that still is doing the same thing it's done since we come to this country. So for a family dynamic, to me, what family means is the resilience of Black people. Mm-hmm. Is understanding that we are survivors and transferring that strength. Like when you come to my museum, I put shackles on everybody, right? And the reason I do the shackles is for they understand it's not the weakness of the struggle, but it's the strength that brought us through the struggle. And so when kids understand the strength that's in them, and most Black families tell you that when you grow up, we understand it's the strength that keeps us and nothing else, the grace of God and the strength. But that's the beauty of the Black family, is always knowing the strength that keeps you going through.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing.
I would say the family bond is social infrastructure, which leads to governance and mutual aid. We are the people who make the United States what it is. We are the culture bearers, and we are also the people who hold it to account. If we are to be that shining city on the hill, it will be because of what Black people do to get us there.
Thank you all for sharing. So speaking of, what does it mean to heal through history, and how do creative and artistic practices help facilitate that healing within communities that are impacted by generational trauma?
History is everything to who we are. Mm-hmm. It defines who we are. That's why they don't want to tell us who we are, right? So if you can define who you are, what you come from, who you are, you're going to walk different, talk different. Because historically, if I had a kid that knew his history and he was 6 years old in school, little Black boy, and the teacher tells him he'll never go to college, and he knows his history, and he looks at us and says, wait a minute, it's people like me that created the major university for the world ever to see, called Timbuktu. That same little guy that's in the class, he knew his history, and the teacher told him to go wash his hands. And he says, I washed my hands before I came in because my big mama told me to wash my hands. And people look like me created the underground water systems for me to wash my hands. So when our kids know that, that's the dynamic of knowledge, that what they come from, they're more than what the world's seeing. They always say we're descendants of kings and queens. And we can walk around with that attitude, how much more would it be? It's the strength of the struggle and not the weakness.
Understanding our history is a gift of independence. And I tell it best this story. So when my daughter was in third grade, she came home. She wanted to do a history assignment for February, of course. And so she was like, Dad, I want to do a story on Queen Nzinga. And I didn't know who she was at the time. And I was like, well, if you found it, let's do it. And so we went out and found all these different books and all this research and brought it in for her. And then she went to school the next day and she told her teacher in third grade, I'm going to do my book report on Queen Nzinga. And the teacher told her, that is not a real person. You should do it on somebody like Beyonce where there's more influence. And so she came home devastated, crying. And so I was like, we'll take care of this. And so we went to the school and we talked to the principal and we talked to the teachers and they were like, well, we don't have the resources. And I was like, you don't have to, we do. So not only will we give you the resources when they're done, but she will present. What that does, is Queen Nzinga, if you don't know, was one of the few queens in Africa who negotiated with the Portuguese to keep slavery out of her country. And that lesson in itself is powerful because no one tells that story. No one tells that story first that the Portuguese had to get permission to come in to traffic people. But then there was people inside Africa who fought that and who were skilled enough to learn new languages because Queen Nzinga spoke, I think, almost 10 or 12 different languages. And even in the negotiation, one part of the negotiation that was so unique as my daughter was doing this study that really empowered her was that when Queen Nzinga went to negotiate with the Portuguese, they did not bring a chair for her. And they expected her to stand before them. And she actually pulled one of her, for lack of a better phrase, I'll use servant today, or followers, and they became her chair, showing her as an equal and having just as much power as they did. When we can share that with our children, that's where we come from as a people, right? That's what we're capable of doing without institutions of today's modern education. Like, because in many ways, what LaMont said, it was Africans that built it. Moors traveled this entire globe. There's records of Black people being all in the southern, and northern continent of these countries. So I think it's important that our children know this history. It gives us a different level of strength and independence.
I think you heal using history by facing history. That's it. And a lot of people think that healing is going to be easy and it's always going to feel good, and facing history is going to give you the warm fuzzies. And I always tell people, like, who told you that? Like, who promised you that it would be comfortable, right? Because no one likes to things I don't like going through the history and reading the most horrific things I've ever read in my entire life. Things I wouldn't even repeat that I've had to take in order to do my work. Good to me, right? And so when you don't want to truly heal and do something different, you turn away from it, you ban it, you make it illegal to teach, you shut down DEI, and we say we don't want to talk about Black history because the hard part is simply facing it. That's not, but anything, right, that is doing, sometimes you're going to have a little pain to get through the other side of it. I tell people it's like working out. It doesn't feel good at first. It doesn't feel, but it gets easier. Right? You get easier. And it's ready to face its history. It will be better. And as long as America continues to run from its history, we're just going to keep running and over and over and over again. So I'm looking to challenge people. You may fix your history. When you go to the doctor, what's the first thing they ask you? You fill out a form about what? So they can do what? Treat you, give you the best treatment, right? Without that information of how to get here, Hannah, right? So America's trying to something that is that so that it can heal itself. But until we do that, we gonna keep it here.
Call it the miseducation of America, right? First, we talk about color. When the kids 2 years old, they teach them about color. They tell you you're white, they tell you you're black, they tell you you're brown, they tell you your whole life what color you are. And then for someone to tell you that they don't see color, it's a basic lie. Because the education system shows you color.
Right.
What we're not is looking at the character of the person in the color. You know, at Roots, I always say I make the comfortable uncomfortable so we all can be comfortable. I call it a healing space. Pull back the wounds of America and treat the wounds. And we cannot run from that. And we see a country today that wants to run from the fact of its history. If white America accepts slavery did happen, then we can accept that we survived the slavery. But we can't get white America to accept the fact that they had slavery. Then does that even make sense? We learn together on this process. We don't eliminate it. We bring it together and cultivate from it, right?
Right.
And we're living in a country now that we don't need people that are silent. We don't need silent people in this room. If you come here and go back home and you don't talk about what you got here, you're a waste of time to what we're dealing with today. We don't need silence. We see what silence does to this country. And we need people with voices. I always say no voice, no power. And our kids have to learn to have a voice so we can all have power.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move- Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were. Just kidding, guys. Just kidding.
I use history to heal by looking into my family. My name is Mariel Gardner. I'm the daughter of Vicky, who's the daughter of Mary, who's the daughter of Rosetta, who is the daughter of Clara, who's the daughter of Julia, who's the daughter of Flora. I am a seventh generation Kentuckian by way of Christian County, and what I've done myself is get back to the things that my people did. I grow a garden. At the West End Women's Collaborative, we have a pollinator garden, tending to flowers. That's something that my grandmother did her whole life. We are reconnecting people to the land through art and history as a means to preserve ourselves and the land. And I think history has a big part in that. Yeah.
Amen, though. Amen.
Can I add one more thing
Absolutely.
on the healing piece? And just because we're talking about history, and I want to ask sometimes, you know, are we talking about healing? Is it Black folks that are healing, or white folks that are healing? Is it institutions that we have to heal and understand history? But I also at the crux of this is that we're living, and LaMont said it, we live in a day where, you know, our history is very relevant today. It's present. Nothing's really changed. We change names, we change stories, we change presidents. But the reality of it is that, you know, I turned 50 this year, and one of the things I enjoy is reading and listening to James Baldwin's old debates when he would debate William Buckley. And, you know, James Baldwin, you know, said something, and I'm paraphrasing, you know, but he talked about in one of their debates that he predicted that Obama would be president, or we would have a Black president if Black folks would behave well enough, white society would act like this, right? He said this in one of the debates. And then he later came back and said, you know, but white folks will do, or this country will continue to do what it can to destroy Black people, and that's what ultimately will destroy the country. You know, and so I think about when we talk about healing, we have to look at what's happening every day that is causing wounds, because you can't heal when somebody's still hitting you, right? When we have systems and economic systems that are constantly poking and poking at scabs. You know, my daughter's 21, and she would not be traumatized if America was not constantly the abuser in this relationship. So
I think we can also name that more deeply than just America broadly. We're talking about rich white people. Those are the folks that are preventing us from access to land, access to food, who are destroying our waterways. So this idea that we just have this blanket thing that is plaguing us, we can all trace that back to capitalism, which rests under that under that umbrella rests patriarchy and anti queer sentiments, all of these things that are preventing people from living their best lives, being their best selves, things that create a hierarchical system in our society. I think we have to name that more bluntly.
And I do want to add to what Miguel said, and you are correct to name it and put it out there for what it is. But I do believe that it is a collective healing because Dr. King was so correct that we are inescapably intertwined. You cannot hurt me without hurting yourself. It's just not going to happen. And maybe a few people, and you think you're winning, but emotionally you're bankrupt, right? And so that America needs collective healing because a lot of us are hurting, and to be in a state, and I don't even know how this is possible in my mind, to wake up and think, who am I going to hate today? Like, takes so much effort. And you all have tried to ignore somebody before, but you really kind of wanted to talk to them. It takes work, it takes effort to say, I'm going to dislike this person today, because it's on your mind. You have to think about it constantly. And to do that constantly must be so draining for people that I don't understand living that way.
Well, I think you said something about rich white men or rich white people. But I think what we miss here is that you can make this villain a villain, but there's accessories to the villain. And there's accessories to the crime. There's poor white people, there's miseducated Black people that are part of this crime that we see committed, right? So I don't know if you can put a face just on one person. Now, economically, yeah, they do have power, don't get me wrong. But who joins the power, who becomes accessory to what happened is what we're seeing happen today. We're seeing people put themselves in a place of somebody that's wealthy and have nothing in common place with the wealth other than the color of their skin. I think what made Martin Luther King so important when he was here is that when he had the Poor People's March, that was a real danger to America because poor white people saw they were no better off than poor Black people. And I think when we get to that point, and we talk about Jesse Jackson being sick right now, when you think about the Rainbow Coalition, that was one of the most powerful things America saw at the time. And that's when we were coming together instead of separating now.
Right.
That's the beauty of America when we create that Rainbow Coalition where everybody's moving forward together.
Okay, I want to talk about the role of alternative kinship structures like churches, chosen families, and neighborhood elders, play cousins. How do you feel like those play into shaping how Black families are experienced and remembered?
I think when you look at the institution of enslavement, enslavement is the foundation for so much of America. And when they're separating families, then you're going to make the family around you, and this is just trickled down. Everyone's play cousins, everybody, everybody's baby mamas, stuff like that. We just did what we had to do to create the families that we needed. And that is global. I just got back from Brazil, and it was as if those were my cousins. And watching the way they maneuvered and watching the food that they prepared reminded me so much of North America. All of this has just trickled down. When I went to Senegal, they said the blood always returns. The blood will always remember. Right, so it's just carried its way, and we make do how we have to make do because we're survivors. It's what we do.
As I've been digging into the 1870 census in Estill County, I made a little movie. Check it out on YouTube. It's called Operation 2052. Little weird in the beginning, it gets good. When you look into those records, and I'm putting them into Excel so I can start to filter out some of the results and see how associations are building. All the bricklayers, they know each other because they are making bricks, they are laying bricks together. All of the people keeping house, they know each other. They are creating networks of mutual aid to support one another. Going further with that, when my great-grandparents moved to Louisville in 1941 from Christian County, it's my great-grandparents and their 3 children, my great-grandfather's brother, his wife, and their 3 children, and they all live in a small apartment together. And then they buy a house at 12th and Kentucky together. All of these people, my great uncle, they stopped having children, but my great grandparents kept going. They had 12 children in the end. So they have this house that they buy together, and then in the early 50s, they sell it, and the proceeds go to each brother so they can each buy their own home. These family bonds, these networks of mutual aid, these are the things that are sustaining us through surviving in this place.
That's great.
Ask that question again for me, please.
What role do alternative kinship structures like churches, chosen families, play cousins, play in shaping how Black families are experienced and remembered?
Yeah, I think it's everything about the Black family.
Mhm.
We're so connected, even though we're disconnected. If there's resources between Black families, we're gonna find a resource to get Ray to school. The resources, someone needs an attorney, we'll find that attorney. We've been resourceful because we've had to be resourceful. That has not changed in our community. It is just part of our community, is that we're connected as much as the world tried to disconnect us.
Mhm.
Let something happen here and watch me get on the phone and call for Hannah, because that's the way we operate. Even if we don't understand it, that's what we're gonna do. Am I right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's our social bond. That's our foundation. That's who we are. And that's always gonna be for the next generation, because we're isolated and disconnected from the world that we're in, but we have to stay connected to make it through this world. And that's what we do as brothers and sisters.
That brings me into the next question I was going to ask is how do you imagine the next generation will encounter Black family bonds?
I think that changes.
Right.
This story has played out over time, over and over and over again. You think about how turbulent the 1860s were, and then how turbulent the 1960s were. If God's willing and the creek do rise, I'll be here in the 2060s, and my goodness, I'll be 70 years old, and I don't think I am prepared or ready for what could happen in 2060, the way that things are going. These folks will find a way, one, and they will probably be smarter, faster than we ever could have been, because these kids are different. I know a lot of people talk about them in a lot of ways, but they have a tremendous amount of empathy within them. They are seeing each other and accepting each other from a very early age. In high school, I remember things that we would say to certain groups of people that would never fly with kids today. These kids are a special group because I think they have been groomed in the way of Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells and Tony K. Bambara and Toni Morrison. And they have all of this data that they have been storing up for centuries, and it's written down. And I think everybody here does something to store data for the next generation so that they have this arsenal. And when the time is right, they will throw that arsenal, and I don't think they will miss.
Well, one thing is that the generations we see will change. If we look at the dynamics of Black and white people in this country, those dynamics are changing. There'll be more minority people in this country than there will be unminority people. But you'll see demographics and the government controlling in case that happens. You see the way they wrap up districts and power. We see what's it, ChatGPT? What is I'm old? What is ChatGPT? You see that? You seeing that being? You see that being used every day.
Right.
Just in the music industry, they're using robots as entertainers. So there's no risk there. If you see that kids are learning from what's it? God, then the whole thing is changed. So the dynamics of people are changing, where Black people, minority becoming more people. Now the computer is becoming the power of the future. That's something that we have to get on top of, not just enjoy it, but understand how it works. That's the biggest threat to the Black family right now is the AI system.
So take that AI system and realize that we all really live in a false construct. Like somebody made this shit up, right? The US government is made up. Our brains are so brilliant. We create words that sound like other words that spell differently and make no sense, right? And that's the you. If we're asking how the next generation is going to adapt to this, they already have. They're living through something that we hoped they never see, but we live in a system that was made up for them to see it and experience it, right? They not only do they have the wisdom, they're going to have the experience, and now they have the data. They then will have the ability to choose to do something different. But understand, like the thing we live in, our economic system is built on slavery, right? Trafficking of people. We don't want to say that. We don't want to talk about the fact that literally today we still make more money off people in our governmental systems than anything else. That's just the reality. We don't want to accept that. Minimum wage means the most I can get, the least I'll give you to get the most out of you. We have institutions that are owned by elected officials that imprison people that earn currency. We currently, one of the things that we have that are happening in different counties across the country is that we have our sheriff's departments signing contractual agreements with the feds that turn our jails into ICE holding camps, and they get paid daily based on the bodies that are in the space. In Jeffersonville and Clark County, and their majority that they're holding right now. But the reality of it is this is all made up for control and power to control people's lives. Because the greatest thing we have is our time. And we don't talk about that. Right? I mean, I say that and that's a tangent. I'm sorry because my brain seems. I think we have as adults, definitely those of us who have children probably are fed up with a lot of the things. And I think what we have fed our kids, and I know at least what we fed our family and and the kids that are directly connected to us, that if you don't like it, redesign it. Do no longer keep sitting in this thing talking about we're going to fix it. They're going to fix it because it will never be fixed. My daughter said to me, and this is how I know that these young folks are that resilient. I think she might have been in 6th grade. We were in the house arguing and debating economics and local government. And she said, Dad, it was built this way. Y'all can't change it. You can only tear it down and rebuild it. That came from her. So we probably shouldn't be answering this question. What we should do is grab these young folks, put them in a room and say, hey, we see the future light because it's theirs. It's not ours.
Thank you. While we are at time, unfortunately, there's some other questions I wanted to ask y'all, but I definitely am going to have some conversations with you guys. Jackie? I do want to say thank you all for sharing your knowledge. Yes.
There we go. Sorry. Apparently I don't know how to use a microphone. So open it up for questions. Don't be shy. No questions? Or any oh, you have a question?
The history of African Americans in Louisville alone is phenomenal. And I do want to make a personal comment that a woman who was near and dear to me, Coretta Jones, I am thrilled to see her recognition here.
We made sure that we have some representation from her project that she did with in conjunction with the Filson. So no, I mean, I've only been here for a year and a half, and just looking through that photo collection alone really was powerful.
Coretta Jones was Maya Angelou's phenomenal woman, and we were lucky to have her here as long as we did.
Let's give it up for her. Yeah.
Any questions or any further comments or anything? Yes.
You were talking, I had 1,000 questions, but I didn't want to interrupt. A lot of what's really on my mind is my concern for the change in our history and our culture as I remember growing up. There were certain traditions and practices that were a part of the culture of Black people that we passed on to our children. And I am concerned that I don't see that right now the way it used to be.
I think that's true because, you know, there's culture and there's history. When we grew up, history was part of culture. Everything was tied into history. And this generation is tied to the culture. It's tied to the what's going on in 1990, not what's going on in the music. And they don't even understand the history of the culture, right? And I use the N-word as example. If you ever come to Roots, and I won't do that here, but I use the N-word to make that example. The history of the word, and now taking the word and culturally saying it has no history to what it had. Black women raped, Black children beaten, Black men lynched. That word is so profound, but yet we use it like it has no history. Simply because we allow culture to replace history, right? That's why the Filson is so important. That's why Roots is so important. But the greatest point to the Filson and the Roots is that we have to learn to spread that word out everywhere, right? Because history is history. Until we just break it down to where we can share it among each other, can we grow? You can't share and edit it what it should be, right? What the story should be told. What we find factual to us, not factual to you. A lot of Black history we have are oral history. Things that I know to be true because I was at that point to hear that story. Right? So our history is even different, but those that identify what history is, will tell you your history doesn't matter. You follow what I'm saying? So to answer your question is that it's culture that's killing us because we're not including history in our culture. And that's what we have to get back to. Does that make sense? Okay.
At the West End Women's Collaborative, we celebrate the 8th of August every year. The 8th is Kentucky's Emancipation Day, which dates back to 1863, and it's prominently celebrated in Paducah. It's the emancipation tradition, along with January 1st. I do a Emancipation Days lecture if you're interested. January 1st, these are the Emancipation Days my ancestors celebrated in southwestern Kentucky. So we gather people on the land that we owned at the corner of 40th and Hale, which is right across the street from Greenwood Cemetery, where my great-great-grandmother is buried. And we celebrate our freedom. And we don't only do that, we always add a historical component to it. So the first year we told the story of the land that we steward from its indigenous occupation to the gentrification we're experiencing now. The second year we created a zine with the reflections on emancipation of 6 Black Kentuckians. And this year we created a map of places of resistance and joy from the 1870s all the way up until now. We are tradition bearers at the West End Women's Collaborative. Who our people are and what they have done is important, and it deserves to be remembered, and not just those big names who you hear every day, but people like Miss Gladys, who lives across the street from the collaborative, who is responsible for getting the walkovers in Chickasaw installed when they came in and built that expressway and tore down those homes. The traffic was going super fast, and she demanded of the federal government that they install walkovers so kids could get to school safely. So we keep those traditions and those stories alive of regular, schmegular, regular, everyday people because they are just as important.
I think also everything Lamont and you have said, just the regular people, the regular stories, there's so many people in our family that have done amazing things. They're just not written down in a history book. There are so many, that's why we named the Unknown Project the Unknown Project. Who are these unknown people? Who are the unknown enslaved? Why aren't their names remembered? How can we start uncovering these names? That's important, especially for young people to be able to come to the Unknown Project, and you can stand in the footprints of Maddie Jones. We had an event and collected the footprints of elders in the Louisville community and then sandblasted them in the sidewalk. You can stand in the footprints of Elmer Lucille Allen, and it's interesting when some kids came down there, they said, she's still, and I said, she is, and you can actually go talk to her. You can actually sit down and learn from Elmer Lucille Allen and everything that she has done. So I think that part is important. Young people do want to learn, but we have to be sure that we're like passing things down to them. Like the young people say, we're losing recipes, right? So I tell my daughter, you better know how to make some collard greens or something. Did I teach you right?
You learn that these kids are really absorbing everything. They're just distributing it a little different. I'm gonna try to land this as I say it. So, and my wife will probably smack me for saying this, but understand that there is such a level of erasure that happens as a culture. We are, all of us are in institutions of white supremacy. Our education systems are founded on it. Most of our government is founded on it. And so when we can start to understand that, right, the whole goal is to erase culture, erase who we are as a people. And that's us as a collective. So I say that, LaMont said it, not all the history is in a book, it's handed down. Hannah talked about how it's being, DE&I and all these different things are being extracted out of the very thing that it's supposed to teach us. But these are things that we're not supposed to learn. We're not supposed to learn that Black people are strong, we're ingenuity, whatever that word what I was trying to get out my mouth, we're innovative. We are inventors, writers, sculptors, all these things. Right, because that gives again us a level of independence. You brought up the Rainbow Coalition. Fred Hampton, assassinated 20-something years old in his bed asleep because he had an understanding that was so profound, that was so out of the very system that they couldn't let anybody understand that. So they had to kill it immediately, whoever they are. And that's no different than like folks like Toussaint Louverture, right? Who was a leader in Haiti who fought, right, the enslaved and won. We don't tell that story. We don't even understand why the Dominican Republic and Haiti are divided as a country when it's all Black folks, right? Because that we need that history to be broken. When we talk about Puerto Rico, most people understand that Puerto Rico was a port. Right? They trafficked the slaves in there and then distributed. They were a distribution center. We don't tell that story either. We also don't tell, we talk about 1619 and the 1600s, but we don't go back as far as the early 1400s when we talk about when the trafficking plan was actually begun. But that's history that if we as a people know it, we can make better decisions today because then we know that this was built intentionally. But our kids are learning that and they're seeing it. And there are folks who are giving them this knowledge. That's what's so scary about social media to some degree and TikTok.
Let me jump on what you said. You said it was intentional, correct?
Yes.
And I think it was intentional. And I think when we brought into the American dream, when we got to the house with a 2-car garage, we believed in the American dream and stopped fighting on the dream to hold on to.
Yes, sir.
So that's a reality that we need to take, and the reality we need to let our children know that we fell asleep at the wheel because we thought we were part of the American dream, but the American dream still had a plan for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. True. Very true.
We're going to end it with question from our friend of the Filson, Miss Charlene. Charlene.
I wanted to ask this young lady with the Women's West End collaboration. You mentioned Christian County. So you're saying your great-grandfather was born there?
All of the women I named from Mary on back to Flora were born there, almost my entire matrilineal line.
Okay, so it's you said your great
Yes.
grandfather. Do you connect and do you go back to
Oh,
Christian County?
yes. I do this, also another workshop you can inquire about. A workshop called My Granny is a Genius. And in that I say I go back to the folk of the road near St. Elmo, where my great grandparents had a farm, and it is still rural there. There is corn, soybean, and tobacco. And I am searching for what Chester and Rosa left me in the soil, and it's not so overtilled that I can't still find it there. I go back home to my source to connect with my people. And I've also helped other friends do that, because when you go back, you begin to remember. I call it were-witching. I've taken a friend who I was tracing her family history to Nelson County, and we had been doing her history for a while. And then all of a sudden, we're at Buttermilk Festival, which is an emancipation derivative. And she says, I remember the name. So we plug it into ancestry.com, and goodness, those people were from Nelson County. So yes, I absolutely go back, and it is my life's work to help people remember in that same way.
Okay, do you know whether or not you're connected or you have any cousins that name Whitlock from Christian County?
I know you.
Now, you're my cousin.
We probably are. Hey, cousin.
Yes.
Sign, you may not know, that partnership with the Latter-day Saints, Saints, Latter-day Jesus Christ. Anyway, the Mormon Church. And we're gonna break a historical thing never happened before. You can come to Roots 101 in our Legacy Center and go and get your ancestry as far as you want for free. So that's something that we'll kick off. We have a press conference on this Friday. We're gonna kick it off, and then we go into full gear in January. But you can come to Roots 101 and get your heritage there. And that was a major play, right? And to do it with the Mormon Church was even more major, because they understand that we have to work better together. So at Roots 101, we would have a legacy center where you can come and do your whole complete genealogy from wherever you need to go. You can do it at Roots. So I threw at that advertisement. Okay.
Of course. And on that note, we're going to conclude the program. Please give kudos or kudos to